Welcome back to the After Party Radio. Today we are finalizing our Sean Combs trial with our favorite attorney, Miss Heather Nicole Johnson. And you may remember her from our previous episodes where we broke down some of the biggest celebrity legal stories in pop culture. And this time, we're going to be diving into the closing chapter of the Diddy case, the sentencing. Now that the verdict and the sentencing has been handed down, people still have a lot of questions. I am the people. All right. So we have to get into it. What is going to come next? We're going to unpack all of that, plus touch on some headlines that keep his name and his family's name in the spotlight even after the conviction. Heather, how are you doing?
I'm great, Montana. How are you?
Pretty darn good. Thank you for asking.
Good.
It has been a few months since
It
we last
has.
saw you.
It
Okay.
has.
I've got to thank you on behalf of all the party animals. We really appreciate you breaking down this whole Diddy case.
It's really fun. I love being here, so I'm back.
So let's just get into it, okay? Heather, now what was your take on the sentence Diddy receive? Was it appropriate to the charges and the evidence that was presented?
Well, without me necessarily, knowing all of the facts or all of the evidence because I wasn't there, I wasn't present. But what I can say is, a lot of times, especially in these high profile cases, we get caught up in the number of years or how long the sentence is that's being imposed. But I think more importantly, the question is whether or not everything leading up to that was actually fair. If they were actually, if he had a fair trial, if his evidence was in fact put on properly, if testimony or witnesses were in fact produced properly, I think if you're able to go back and look at it from that angle, even if you're not comfortable with the sentencing, you can at least find some sort of peace of mind knowing, okay, well, I can kind of see how they got here. Even though I don't agree with it, I at least know how we got here. So, and with criminal cases, that's always going to be the case.
Now, can you explain how federal sentencing guidelines work, like whether the judge had much discretion?
Well, typically, now keep in mind, I do not practice any criminal whatsoever on the state level or on the federal level. But what I can tell you is that from a judge's discretion standpoint, whether or not he or she can actually go above and beyond, more likely than not, the answer is no, because they have what we call sentencing guidelines. And based on whatever it is that you were convicted of, they have to follow those guidelines. Now, the guideline may be a window. For example, you hear a lot of times people say, oh, he or she was sentenced 5 to 10 years or something like that. That's the window that the sentencing guideline requires, depending on the state, depending on the federal jurisdiction. So, it just depends on the case.
Now, in the remarks that the judge gave for sentencing, he did mention some of the charges that Sean Combs was not convicted of or even charged with during his sentencing. Like, is that fair, and can he do that?
Well, so in the criminal world, it's my understanding that when a judge is determining the sentencing, he is allowed to look at the defendant's character. He's allowed to take into consideration the defendant's behaviors in general. And if there's a pattern of behavior, whether or not that pattern poses a risk to the community, and that would help implement or impact whether or not the sentence is just or not, or extreme or lenient. So, there's a lot of moving parts. No, you wouldn't think from just a surface level view that you bringing up what I did in, something that I wasn't convicted of would be fair. But if we have you on video doing something, whether or not you were actually convicted of it is a different question. And so we're able to at least factor in what our eyes have seen.
Okay, because I was really thinking that when he did that, I was like, is that going to be room for an appeal?
Well, as long as he's within the sentencing guidelines, right?
But there were no sentencing guidelines.
Well, there had to be for the one that he was actually sentenced on, right? So we are mixing up a judge's opinion with his ruling. Those are two different things, right? So a judge is allowed to make commentary or to have commentary about how they feel. A lot of times you'll see judges giving clients or defendants, well wishes in the sense of hoping that they're able to come back from whatever it is that has them going to prison. So it just depends on the judge.
And I believe this judge basically said that the reason why he sentenced Diddy the way that he did is because he did not think that if he let him out immediately, that he would have learned his lesson.
Well, see, there you go. That goes in line with what I was saying. It's all about what that judge considers a pattern, what that judge considers as part of your character. Was this a one-off, or is this just who you are,
So let me ask you this. Overall, just as I understand you're not a criminal attorney, but just from your perspective, from beginning to end, was this a win for Diddy? Like, given all of the circumstances, given everything that we heard, that we saw, you know.
Well, I'm going to say yes, in the sense of, it could have always been worse, right? Because there were charges or a charge that he was not convicted of. He could have been found guilty on all the charges, which we also know would have made his sentencing possibilities look a little different. So it just depends on, to some people, fair is him getting in the car and going home. It just depends on what you consider to be fair in consideration of what the evidence and the testimony was.
And just for the people who are listening, he was sentenced to 50 months.
And my math is that, 5 years?
Yes.
5 years? Okay.
And so he had 14 months served because he's, been detained since last October, I believe.
Wow. It's been a year.
So he's got 36 months to go. And, for our TikTok attorneys, they tell us that 85% of that time is required.
For federal sentences.
Yes.
Correct. Mm-hmm.
So he could be getting out as soon as 2 years and 6 months with all of the factors included.
Correct.
So 2 years. Do you think that's enough time? Do you think?
Well, I wasn't on the jury. So we don't know, the reporters were allowed in the courtroom, but as just TV viewers or news consumers, I was not there. I will just say what's more important, and I'm sure his lawyers would agree with this, is whether or not he got a fair trial.
Do you think he got a fair trial?
I would hope that he did. And if they're not barking about it, I'm assuming that they feel he did. Mm-hmm. Yes. Okay.
Now, some people online are saying Diddy's money and his status protected him for years. Do you think this case shows the limits of celebrity power?
Well, I definitely think that the celebrity element factored in him being indicted to begin with. So, do I think that he did anything wrong? I mean, in terms of New York law or federal law, apparently the state or the federal, the United States government thought that they had enough to prove beyond a reasonable doubt. And the jury agreed, at least part of the way. So I'm in a position where I don't necessarily want to speak or trump whatever verdict they came up with, but in the court of public opinion, just having been a fan for all these years, 20 years, Diddy was my college soundtrack. It's hard to believe or to see someone that you consider a celebrity or famous to that extent go through this.
Yeah.
So, I hate it for everybody, him and the victims. It's just not a good situation.
Right. Now, when the public says he got off easy, how much of that is misunderstanding of how sentencing actually works?
Well, a lot of it is because, again, there are guidelines that the judges are bound to. These are statutory from a federal standpoint. And, there's just some things are mandatory. Some sentences may be discretionary, or sentencing rather may be discretionary, but quite often in these types of situations, the judge's hands are tied.
Okay. Now, his family, especially his sons, have faced online harassment. So, can family members sue for defamation or invasion of privacy in situations like this?
Well, that's a really good question. What I will say to that is, when you're a public figure, it makes you somewhat exempt, unfortunately, arguably, unfortunately. But you have a higher threshold, rather, to proving that you are the victim of an invasion of privacy. Now, with respect to the other, you said defamation. Well, we all know that the sole main defense to defamation is the truth, right?
Right.
So, I mean, sometimes that can speak for itself. And, I don't think that the courts always necessarily, have to intervene. A lot of these cases settle out of court, as we know, with even the Diddy situation, settled out of court before it turned criminal. And it depends on the facts. It depends on what's happening between the parties.
Now, how does someone in his position even begin, do you think, to rebuild their reputation legally?
Ooh, that's a good question as well.
Because while you think about that, there has been reports that he has been selling off assets left and right.
Well, I'm sure he
And
needs.
he basically told the judge at sentencing, his life is over, his businesses are done. Like, I want to say, I read somewhere, like, there were hundreds of employees that lost their jobs due to this, you know. So, I mean, like, what do you think, though?
From a PR standpoint, fortunately for him, America, or even just the world in general, we're a place where we love a good comeback story. The lower you go, it's almost like we want to see you get even higher. Now, I've never seen anyone necessarily bounce back from a sexual violence nature, a case of this nature. But that doesn't mean it can't happen. There's a first time for everything. And with the right money, the right team, they have agencies here that specialize in rehabbing celebrity reputations whenever there are crises that they've are a part of or have created themselves. Crisis management. It's a whole thing. It's an industry. It's a thing. So I'm sure that we're going to start seeing, even if it's no more than him keeping his children in the forefront, because that garners sympathy, that garners softness. From what I understand, the twins spoke at his sentencing, or all six of his children
Yeah.
spoke, so they know what, to use. And I'm not saying he's using his children, but the professionals know what to use to
Well,
be able to create that rehab.
and let me also say this too. I think, Diddy knows a thing or two about a thing or two too. I mean,
Exactly.
he's in there giving entrepreneur classes. He's doing some kind of series with the inmates, which I think is a way for him also, doing some PR work behind the bars.
Of
Like,
course.
so yeah, which I ain't gonna lie, when I heard he was doing that, like with the inmates, I was like, oh, what a time to be in jail with Diddy.
Well, this is news to me. I didn't
Oh,
know.
okay.
So that's interesting. I had no idea.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, I'm
Interesting.
like, what a time to be in jail,
Yeah,
baby.
and he's so high profile that I've also wondered about his safety.
Oh, now that has been brought up as well. That I believe no sooner after sentencing, his lawyers like they're appealing it. They're trying to get him out of there. They're saying his life is in danger. And while he's doing these great things in the prison, obviously we know that there are some people who don't care about that. They want cred, and it's like if we, do something to Diddy, that's credit for me. And so, you got a little bit of that.
Right.
But, as we wrap up this whole Diddy thing, it's done, Heather. We may not be able to talk about Diddy for quite some time, at least for 2 years,
At
hopefully,
least for
unless
two
something
years.
else comes up,
Right.
But my last question for you, as a lawyer, as a woman, what was your personal reaction to seeing how this case ended?
Again, I was saddened by all of it. I did not want this for anyone.
For the culture.
For the culture, for a black man who has succeeded and excelled the way that he has, his children, even from the standpoint, whatever trauma that she's endured or had to deal with or fight through. It's just not good. It's not what you want to hear or see. But I think I may have mentioned this before, but the last time I was here or not, but it's just an eye opening. It's one of those situations where you look at it and you can't help but figure out or want to figure out what your lesson is in this. What is this teaching you? Little old me here in Dallas County. What is that teaching me? What is this teaching you? And as a woman, as a hip hop fan, as a black person, as a black woman, what is this teaching us? And that's one of the things that I've been looking at in this from that lens in this situation. And I think one of the biggest things to come out of it is that I know I said this before, but you gotta love yourself, period, on both sides. Because I think if self love had been part of the equation, boundaries and limits would have been part of the equation, and we may not be here today.
Right. Now, y'all listen, this Diddy situation has had the streets and the internet talking for months, but hearing it from a real legal perspective hits different. Heather, I got to thank you for breaking it all down for us and not sugarcoating it.
Of course.
Please tell the people how they can stay connected to you.
You can follow me on Instagram. You can actually follow my campaign page, Johnson for Judge. You can also follow my personal page at She Got Him Custody on Instagram. Or you can send me a friend request on Facebook at Heather Nicole.